Justin Bieber was only 15 when Sean P. Diddy Combs first took him under his wing, but behind the red carpets and flashing cameras, a darker story was quietly unfolding. In early 2025, an obscure Reddit thread titled "Music Industry Secrets They'll Never Tell You" began gaining traction overnight. At first, it seemed like another conspiracy-laced post, buried among outlandish claims about hidden messages in music videos and underground parties with A-list celebrities. But buried deep in the thread was a single comment that caught everyone's attention. It read, "The real story lies with the R&B mogul who promised fame and delivered fear. Big in the 2000s, still untouchable. His secrets aren't buried, they're protected." That comment exploded. Within hours, amateur investigators began dissecting every word. Theories were thrown around, names were suggested, discarded, and revisited. But one name began to stick: Sean P. Diddy Combs. The clues fit: a mogul with decades of industry influence, an empire that spanned fashion, music, and media, and a reputation that had always felt carefully curated. As speculations grew, old rumors began resurfacing, whispers of controlling behavior, strange power dynamics, and unexplained disappearances from public view of certain young artists who had once been closely tied to him. Then came the post that changed everything. On a quiet Tuesday night, Justin Bieber uploaded a black and white image to his Instagram story. It was an old photo of him and P. Diddy at what looked like a music industry party from the early 2010s. They were standing close.
Yes.
Bieber much younger, looking stiff and uncertain. The only caption was a single broken heart emoji. Comments were turned off, and within minutes the story vanished. Screenshots flooded Twitter and TikTok. Fans were quick to connect the dots, especially those who remembered how often Diddy had been seen around Bieber in his early years. The reaction was immediate. Some said the post was nothing, just an old photo and a cryptic emoji. Others were convinced it was a silent cry for help. Influencers and pop culture analysts began revisiting old videos, scrutinizing body language, tone, and context. One clip in particular went viral: a 2009 backstage interview where Diddy affectionately referred to Justin as his special little guy. At the time, it had been seen as a quirky moment between a mentor and a rising star. Now, with new context, it seemed unsettling. Bieber had smiled nervously in that clip. Rewatching it in 2025, the smile didn't look like innocence, it looked like discomfort. Speculation reached a fever pitch. People began pulling together timelines. They noted the sudden decline in Justin's public appearances during certain years, particularly around the time he had been most involved with Diddy's circle. Articles were unearthed about canceled tours, emotional breakdowns, and rehab stints that, in hindsight, seemed to align with his interactions with certain figures in the industry. The once dismissed whispers about exploitation in Hollywood no longer felt so far-fetched. What had started as an anonymous comment had now evolved into a cultural reckoning. And while no names had been directly mentioned, the message was becoming clear. Something dark had lived just beneath the surface of fame. And Justin Bieber's broken heart may have been the first crack in the wall of silence. As the internet unraveled the layers of suspicion surrounding the cryptic Instagram post, attention quickly turned to the past. People began combing through the digital archives, rewatching interviews, talk show appearances, and award show moments. What once seemed like lighthearted industry banter now carried a different tone. The way Justin Bieber looked at certain people, how he hesitated when asked about his early mentors, how often he redirected praise away from specific names, all of it was being reinterpreted. The narrative was shifting. A key moment resurfaced. A promotional video from 2009 where a young Justin, barely 15 years old, was filmed arriving at Diddy's New York apartment. Diddy, speaking directly to the camera, announced that he was taking this kid under his wing. He handed Justin keys to a luxury car, joked about teaching him the ropes, and told viewers to watch what we do. At the time, fans had found the video endearing, a successful mogul embracing a rising star. But now, those same fans were disturbed. Justin had barely said a word in the video. He looked overwhelmed, uncertain. His smile was there, but it didn't seem real. Social media platforms became investigation hubs. Timelines were drawn out. People noted how often Bieber appeared in photos or footage with Diddy in his earliest years, only for that connection to suddenly disappear around 2013. After that point, their interactions seemed to vanish. Collaborations, no shoutouts, no public support. It was as if the mentorship had been erased. Former fans turned investigators started finding interviews where Justin made vague statements about people who pretended to help or situations I wish I'd avoided. At the time, many assumed he was referring to drug use or personal mistakes. But now, these quotes were being re-examined in a new light. Then, a minor but explosive discovery surfaced. In a 2015 interview with a small European radio station, Justin had briefly mentioned cutting ties with people who didn't have my best interest at heart. When the interviewer asked if he meant anyone specific, Justin chuckled nervously and said, "It's better if I don't say names. Some people are too powerful." That quote was now being viewed as something far more than a generic comment. It was seen as a red flag. Conspiracy theories escalated. Online sleuths began pointing out how other young artists who had been closely associated with Diddy had either vanished from the public eye or faced mental health struggles. Names were mentioned, timelines compared. The theory was no longer just about Justin. It was about a possible pattern: young artists' early fame, sudden silence. Yet there were no official statements, no lawsuits, no police reports. Everything lived in the shadows of implication and conjecture. The only thing that seemed certain was this: Justin Bieber's sudden post had cracked open a sealed vault of suspicion. And the more people looked inside, the more questions they found. The industry's carefully managed facade was beginning to crumble, and the past was no longer willing to stay buried. The internet frenzy hit a new peak when TMZ published an article claiming it had received a cache of encrypted files from an anonymous whistleblower. The files, according to the report, were sent via a secure server, marked with a message that simply read, "If you want the truth, start here." Inside were hundreds of documents, emails, legal agreements, travel logs, and photos allegedly tied to some of the most powerful names in music. Though TMZ did not release the full contents, they confirmed that several of the documents appeared legitimate after consulting with forensic analysts. What made this leak different from the usual tabloid chaos was the specificity. One document in particular caught the public's attention: a signed non-disclosure agreement from 2011 with Justin Bieber's name on it. The document referenced an event in Los Angeles, referred to only as a private mentoring session, and was marked Level 3 Access Confidential. No other details were listed, but the signatures were real. The NDA had been co-signed by an executive assistant at Bad Boy Records, Diddy's label. Other files included cryptic emails between various music executives. One email chain contained the line, "He's nervous. Make sure he gets the bonus package. No press. No panic." Another email, sent from a corporate account linked to an event planning firm used by Diddy's inner circle, referred to a list of approved attendees for a weekend retreat, all of whom were under the age of 21. The media world exploded. Podcasters, TikTok investigators, and YouTube journalists began analyzing every detail. Some tried to discredit the files, calling them fabricated or misinterpreted. Others insisted the evidence was overwhelming and hinted at something deeper, something more systemic. Meanwhile, legacy news outlets treaded carefully, refusing to directly name names, but reporting heavily on emerging claims of abuse in the entertainment industry. Then came the turning point. A freelance journalist with a reputation for investigating entertainment corruption uploaded a video explaining that he, too, had received portions of the leak. In his video, read excerpts from text conversations between two unnamed security team members who had worked a private party at a Miami mansion in 2011. In the texts, one guard described being told to stay away from the third floor and to confiscate any cell phones brought onto the property. The guard wrote, "It's not like a party up there, it's like a test." As pressure mounted, fans began demanding answers from Justin himself. Theories swirled. Was he preparing to file charges? Was he negotiating a tell-all deal? At every public appearance, every tweet, every update on his social media was interpreted like a code. Finally, a major announcement was made by his team. Justin would be giving his first in-depth interview in over 5 years, and exclusive. Sit-down special on a major streaming platform. The press release said only this: "The truth doesn't disappear. It waits. And now it's time." Speculation turned into anticipation. No one knew what Justin would reveal. But the world was ready to listen. The day of the interview arrived, and the world watched as Justin Bieber walked onto a dimly lit stage. Seated across from a well-known journalist known for handling high-stakes, emotionally charged conversations. Justin looked calm, but there was a weight in his posture that hadn't been seen before. Dressed in neutral tones, and noticeably without any jewelry or branding, he seemed stripped down both literally and emotionally. He didn't start with accusations or dramatic claims. Instead, he spoke slowly, choosing each word carefully. He talked about what it was like to grow up in an industry where adults held all the power, where contracts were signed before he was old enough to drive, and where mentorship often blurred into something else entirely. He described the early days of fame as a blur of flashing cameras, studio sessions, and hotel rooms, rarely having a say in where he went or who he spent time with. Without naming names, he recalled moments when he felt trapped in environments that didn't feel safe, where saying no didn't seem like an option. He talked about people who wrapped control in kindness, promising protection while pushing him further into isolation. He spoke about the constant pressure to perform, not just on stage, but in every setting: interviews, dinners, private parties. He admitted to moments of deep confusion and guilt, unsure whether his discomfort was real or just the cost of fame. He paused before explaining that he had been silenced not with threats, but with contracts, with promises, with obligations that kept him quiet for years. He didn't go into graphic detail, didn't need to. The emotion in his voice said, "Enough." The interviewer, clearly moved, asked if he regretted staying silent. Justin shook his head and said he wasn't ready back then. He explained that speaking out required more than courage, it required clarity. And now, with the world finally beginning to listen, he felt the time was right. Though he never once mentioned Diddy directly, the subtext was impossible to ignore. Every reference, every veiled description, pointed toward a figure who once held sway over his early career. The audience didn't need a name. The silence around it spoke louder than words. Clips from the interview spread across every platform within hours. Hashtags trended worldwide. Celebrities began showing support, some through vague posts of solidarity, others by sharing their own uncomfortable experiences in the industry. A few former child stars even hinted at similar stories, choosing, like Justin, not to name names, but to echo the feeling of being used, controlled, and then discarded. Meanwhile, Diddy's legal team released a statement denying any wrongdoing. They called the insinuations defamatory fiction and accused media outlets of enabling a smear campaign. Yet, the public reaction had already shifted. For years, the image of Diddy had been carefully polished mogul, innovator, tastemaker. But now, cracks were visible. And Justin's quiet, composed voice had done what years of rumors could not. It forced people to finally pay attention. Just when it seemed like the storm had begun to settle, a new wave hit harder and darker than anything before. An independent journalist, known for digging into controversial celebrity stories, uploaded a documentary to YouTube titled The Vault: Secrets of the Third Floor. Within 24 hours, it racked up over 10 million views. This wasn't speculation. This time there were recordings. The centerpiece of the documentary was a series of audio clips recorded by a former security guard who had worked at one of Diddy's private estates in Miami between 2010 and 2012. The man's voice, distorted for anonymity, told a chilling story of a restricted floor in the mansion that staff called the Vault. According to him, this wasn't a vault for valuables. It was a place where phones were locked away. Cameras were covered, and access was granted only to those on a very specific list. Young artists, including several who were underage at the time, were often escorted there during high-profile parties. The security guard claimed he never knew exactly what happened behind the doors. But he was told explicitly, "You don't ask questions about level 3. One of the logbooks from the estate, smuggled out and shown in the documentary, included initials, arrival times, and floor access notes. On a dated entry from 2011, reactions were swift. The documentary went viral overnight, igniting a second media frenzy. Investigative journalists confirmed that the address listed in the video matched a known property previously owned by Diddy. Online forums flooded with timelines. Piecing together which artists were present at the estate during that period, public sentiment began to shift from speculation to outrage. Within a week, the FBI announced that it had opened a preliminary investigation into the allegations. As though they didn't name specific individuals, the implication was clear. Former employees were reportedly being contacted. Legal experts on news panels began discussing potential charges: conspiracy, trafficking, abuse of power. Still without direct testimony or more concrete proof, the case remained largely in limbo. But the silence was breaking. One by one, former artists began stepping forward. Some posted vague messages of solidarity. Others went further, recounting instances of coercion, manipulation, and emotional abuse. While no one yet had provided the kind of evidence that would lead to charges, the pattern became undeniable. As for Justin, he posted a simple message on his Instagram story: a sunrise over a quiet lake. With the words, "It's only the beginning," the house of cards had started to fall. For decades, the music industry had protected its elite, wrapping them in money, power, and silence. But now, the truth had a voice, and that voice was no longer afraid.